All right, so I got a call the other day from a woman who I sort of know here in the business community, and she had talked to her boss a few minutes early, and she was fuming mad. She said her boss warned her that the company might be facing layoffs in third quarter. And they're in the process of every department taking a look at everyone on the team at who should stay, who should go. Now, she assumed she would stay in that situation because she was very good at what she did. And the boss said, I need to put you on notice because you never come to the office. This is noticed by the higher-ups. And she said, well, wait a second. We were told that we could work remotely and that there would be no being penalized for that. And he said, you're not being penalized for it, but human beings make decisions based on gut feelings, and nobody seems to know who you are. She told me, she goes, Tom, I was one of the people who fought for the ability to work remotely because we have people they hired during the pandemic who don't live here, who live in other places. And she said, so I said, if you live in Austin, you should also be able to have that same thing. And he said, that is true, except when times get tough, people make decisions for a lot of reasons. I'm just warning you. She was mad and she called me and said, you know about this relationship stuff and why people matter in business. She goes, I am so much more productive at home. And I said, that's awesome. But there's a lot of metrics decided in when they make decisions of who stays or who goes. Your boss did you a big favor. He's letting you know, show up once in a while. Because the way people make relationships is through shared experiences. And a Slack channel and a couple of Zoom calls is not the same as being in the office saying, hey, what are you doing for lunch? Where are you gonna go? She wasn't happy with my answer. And she said, starting on Monday, she'll start going in 2 or 3 days a week. But she's gonna go look for another job. And I said, that's fine, that is entirely your option, and your boss did you a favor. He could have not told you and let you get laid off in September. Instead, he's giving you a leeway to show that you wanna be part of a team player. And she said to me, culture inside the company is crap when you're a tech worker. It doesn't matter if anyone likes me or knows me, I hate this. And I said, you're not gonna find a company where being a human being and a person isn't part of the equation for your future. Your network matters. So all opportunities in life come from people. And we have to remember, no matter how good you are at your job, people judge each other all the time. And sometimes people say, well, Tom, that's not fair. People don't know me. They shouldn't judge me. Have you ever been cut off in traffic? Do you immediately, first thing you think of, oh, you know what? I don't really know that person. I don't know where they're going. I don't know, maybe they have an emergency. Maybe they're having a bad day. Go ahead. Is that your normal reaction? What do you do when you get cut off in traffic? Somebody scream it out.
Raise one finger.
Raise one finger. Cuss. What happens to your blood pressure and just your overall mood when someone does that in traffic or anything else? What happens physiology-wise to your body? You react. You tense up. You get mad. Adrenaline flows in. Well, isn't that sort of judging a situation where you don't know everything? Because you don't know, maybe that person, maybe, there's an emergency at home with one of their kids. Maybe they have to be somewhere. They're late for a very important meeting. You don't sit back and say, well, I don't know enough about them as a person. You flip up that middle finger and make a lot of judgments about who they are. That's what happens everywhere we go. It's part of being human. I'm not saying it's fair that people judge us by how we look, where we went to college, how we cut our hair, what types of clothes we wear, or if we actually come into the office and participate with the team. I'm not saying it's fair that that's the reason they judge us. I'm telling you that you're always being judged by the people you work with and actually thinking about how do I build what I call uncommon connections? How do I build relationships that matter becomes really important. So sometimes people go, I don't want to go to Tom's session because he's going to talk about networking. And they go like, ugh, especially when you're dealing with tech-oriented people. They're like, oh God, the networking, oh, I hate that. People always tell me, Tom, I hate networking. The actual definition of networking, if you look it up in the dictionary, is the creation of long-term and mutually beneficial relationships between two or more people where everyone in the relationship benefits more because of it than they would without it. And people go, well, I still hate networking. I go, do you hate the long-term or the mutually beneficial side of networking? They go, no, I hate showing up and people shoving business cards in your hand and crappy cheese and stale wine, crappy wine and stale cheese. And I'm like, that's not networking. That's bad food choices by the meeting planner. But networking is the creation of those long-term relationships. And for years, and many of you have seen me speak at Product Camp and other things around town, last year I took on the role as the CEO of the Austin Technology Council. How many people have heard of HEC? HEC was founded 30 years ago. It was spun out of UT and the Austin Technology Incubator with two purposes: to put tech on the map locally as the economic driver of Austin. Check? Exactly, right? I think we all know what the economic driver of Austin is. The other thing was to pull the community together, because there wasn't really a tech community 31 years ago. So I was hired to reinvent the organization, because the first one is gone, and the assumption has been, well, we already have this tech community. But part of my role now is to make that number two, that bring the community together, to give it a new look. Because yes, we are a community, but we've become so large. So many people have moved here. A lot of people aren't connected, and there's a lot of verticals. There's fintech, there's gaming, there's all these different things. So I do that. But in addition to that, I speak about building community. And people always think networking externally. You're looking for a job, you're in sales or marketing. But today, post-pandemic, how you connect with people inside your company is more important than it probably ever has been. Because for many of us, a lot of people, their whole social life, or much of their social life, was around going to the office. You'd drive in, you'd have coffee with people. You didn't even think about it. This was what work was for all of us. I mean, there's exceptions out there before the pandemic. But for most of us, you went to an office, you had coffee, around lunch, somebody walked by your cube going, hey, a bunch of us are going over to Torchy's, you want to come? And you'd be like, oh, I like Taco Deli better. And then you find your friends who want to go to Taco Deli. And you'd go do that. You'd have that little social thing. And then after work, there might be a happy hour. That was how we socialized. And then in March 2020, we were all sent home. My wife is an extreme introvert. She spent the first 6 months of the pandemic saying, oh my God, I've been studying for this my whole life. I get to work from home, I get work done, I'm productive, other than having a husband who talks a lot. It's really great. However, even my wife, 8-9 months into the pandemic, was like, take me somewhere. Get me out of this house to where there's some people. So it was that way. We now have this world of remote work, hybrid work, at home. And people ask me all the time, both because of my role with HEC and because of teaching this subject, people ask me all the time, which is best? You know what the answer is? I don't know. It's best what's best for your company. And every company's different. There are companies that are fully distributed teams, and they've worked and they've built relationships and people feel really connected. And there's companies that have great cultures because everybody comes to the office. And then there's hybrid where they do it both ways. But it's what matters for that company. So just because you prefer a remote workplace doesn't mean that's what your boss is going to prefer for the long run, or vice versa. So you have to find the places that work for you. And it is true, when we went home, a lot of companies saw productivity soar. But the reason was we were home with nothing else to do. People started working like 10-hour days. That's why one of the reasons productivity went way up. However, those teams worked well together because they all knew each other. But now we've had turnover. New people have been hired. I have a friend who works on a team who was bragging about how they were connected over Zoom, how great it was. 3 years later, he goes, I don't know, we have no culture at my company. Because the new people have come in and they don't share those experiences. So I talk about human engagement. That's all. It's not networking, it's not cheap cheese, it's not remote versus in-person. It's human engagement. Whether you're online or you're in person, how you engage with others is your secret weapon to the future of your career. Whether you want to stay with your company, or whether you want to found your own company, or whether you're going to have to change jobs by choice or by a layoff. That's your secret weapon. So I give you this tool anytime you interact with people, and it's E = MC squared. You're all like, what? Whose theory is that? Einstein. I would not pretend I'm as smart as Albert Einstein. I did not go to Carnegie Mellon. I went to the biggest party school in America in the 1980s. To get in, you needed a 2.2 in high school, and you had to fog a mirror. So I'm not going to pretend I'm as smart as Albert Einstein. But what I've done is I've stolen E = MC squared, I've repositioned it, and I'm giving it back to you as a networking tip. And that is, just remember, anytime you engage with people, online, on a Slack channel, on Zoom, or in person at work, or in person at a place like this, remember that engagement equals meaningful connections between 2 or more people. That's all. Every time you engage, say, am I having a meaningful relationship? Am I having a meaningful conversation? Which means we have to get a little personal with people. We have to think, who is the person on the other side of this conversation? Because if everything is just, here's my project, here's my work order, here's my stuff, they don't know who you are, you don't know who they are. And when it comes time to who's gonna get laid off, it's really hard, if you're in senior management, to lay off your friends and the people everybody loves. It's really easy to lay off the people, even if they're good. Nobody really knows who they are. They don't know if they have kids, they don't know if they have a dog, they sit there quiet on Zoom, they turn off their camera. It's really easy for those people to be like, eh. And that's what happens in a world where humans are making decisions. So one of the things I teach is that community, collaboration, and conversations can solve all problems. Think about this for a minute. Washington, D.C., government, the Senate, the Congress. What if everyone who worked in that building came to work every day and said, my number one goal with everyone in the building is more community, more collaboration, and more conversations? You think our government would run better? But that's not what they do. It's all my side versus your side. How do I get what I want? How do I get a bridge built to nowhere? All of these different things. They're not looking at what's best for the community. How do we all collaborate to create win-win situations? And let's sit down and talk about these things. So I believe we have to do that. And I think for you, if you're worried about it, if half the people raise their hand that they're worried they could get laid off, so maybe, if you're one of those people who is concerned about that, think about, am I contributing in my place of business and in my company and in my industry to more community, more collaboration, and more conversations? Because what you want to have is a stronger inner circle. Because if you have a few people in your industry, in your company, who know who you are, they like you, they trust you, and they know that you do good work, and they know that you care about the whole community, if you have a small circle, and by definition, an inner circle can't be everyone you're connected to on LinkedIn. How many people have more than 1,000 people they're connected to on LinkedIn? Of those 1,000, keep your hands up if some of those people you don't really know, you just accepted a link, right? Yeah, we all have those people. Here's the problem with LinkedIn. If I meet this gentleman here who is chewing, sorry, what's your name? Caleb? Yeah, is it Caleb? Caleb. If I meet Caleb just now, which I just did, and he sends me a LinkedIn request, and I accept it, 3 years from now, somebody goes, oh, I see you're connected to Caleb. Do I know Caleb at all? The only time I interacted with him was after my speech at Product Camp. Not really. But connected to me on LinkedIn is a gentleman named David Morris. David is the first person I met at San Diego State University in 1984. He and I owned a business together for a decade. We have traveled the world with our families. We talk on the phone 2 or 3 days a week. And he is my oldest daughter's godfather. Is it the same relationship that I have to Caleb? No, but LinkedIn doesn't know the difference. So people think, oh, I have all these connections. Somebody was trying to sell to me to market my speaking business. And the person told me, I've added 3,000 people to my LinkedIn in the last 3 months. So what? If they don't know who you are, so I started looking at the engagement he got on LinkedIn. He'd make a post, 2 likes, no comments. Those connections are useless. They're not paying attention to him, they don't know him, they don't care. So we have to remember we have to get back to the personal side. Now your inner circle can only be about 6 to 12 people. Now that's gonna depend on a lot of things, how active you are, how outgoing you are, what business you work in, how much you cultivate it, but you can't have 50 people in your inner circle. Some people go, oh yes, I can, outlier. But think about, in your business world, how many people have more than 12 people who you engage with all the time, you know everything about them, they know about you, and if you got laid off tomorrow, they'd pick up the phone and start calling people for you. How many people have more than 12? Yeah, nobody. I don't probably have more than 12, and I teach this and I work hard on it. Maybe with social media we can get that up to 20, but it can't be 500 people. You cannot have an inner circle of that. So you need to cultivate those key people, because number one, they'll fight for you inside the business. Number two, if you get laid off, they'll open up things. And number three, if they work at a different company and you get laid off, they'll go to their boss and say, we've got somebody great that we can bring onto the team. People don't do that for strangers. So you need to cultivate that. But a lot of you are like, oh God, there's so much to do at work. Why would I network? Why would I care? Well, number one, it helps build and strengthen relationships in your community. And your community could be product management. Your community could be the vertical you work in, which could be fintech or gaming, or your community could be all of Austin. But the more you engage, pay attention, and care about people, it broadens that opening for you. Number two, having a bigger network leads to innovation. So my future son-in-law is one of the smartest mathematicians of his generation, and he's a quant for a hedge fund, and he likes going to the office. Now, by definition, you would think one of the smartest mathematicians would be a huge introvert, and he is. But I said, why do you like going to the office? He goes, the innovation. He goes, I'm a quant. I goes, I'm a researcher and I'm a programmer. He goes, it's really art. And he goes, when you're working on something and you get stuck, during the pandemic, you'd have to go on the Slack channel, find out who was available, set up a time on Zoom. Then on Zoom, you'd have to spell out what you were trying to do. He goes, it could take hours. In the office, I can walk in, pull another quant, we can whiteboard, we can laugh. 5 minutes later, we've solved the problem. Having more people you're connected to who you can turn to with a problem makes you more innovative. It also makes it easier to answer the tough questions. Because all of you, no matter what you do for a living, all of you sometimes are going to have somebody come to you, your boss or somebody else, and ask you a question that is way out of your area of expertise. But if you have a big network, you can say, I don't know the answer to that, but my friend Becky, she's the best person at that. Let me make a call. You make the call, you get the answer, you bring the answer to your boss, you're the hero. If you don't know Becky, you have to look at your boss and go, I don't know. So having a big network allows you to answer those tough questions. And it brings you career opportunities, right? The people who know you, like you, and trust you are going to be the people who say, hey, my company's looking to hire. Do you want to come over? That's where the opportunities are going to come from. And having a lot of people, they've done studies that show that people who are connected to other people who have friendships as they get older, cognitively are sharper. They try new things, they get out and do things they haven't done before. They have a better quality of life and they have more fun. So being connected to people opens up a lot of doors for you. So I call my presentation that I do for companies, and when I try to get teams to really pay attention to it, I call it Uncommon Connections. Because a common connection now is a like, a link, a share, and a follow. But as I said before, I don't care if you have 5,000 people on LinkedIn. If they don't know who you are, they're not going to wake up in the middle of the night and go, we should hire him. He'd be perfect, because they don't know. So you need to have those uncommon connections. Now, you got that inner circle. You can have more uncommon connections. If you have 5,000 people you're connected to on LinkedIn, you could have 50 of them that know you to some level. They may not be part of the inner circle, but I think everyone should have a list of 50 people in their company, in their competitor's company, in their industry, and their extended community who, if you picked up the phone and said, let's go for lunch, they would say, of course, because they know exactly who you are. And I don't think it's hard to get to 50. Doesn't mean you have to be best friends. They don't have to come to your house for Thanksgiving, but everybody should be connected to 50. And sometimes people go, 50? All right, make it 25. But you should have some uncommon connections, and those are people, you care about them, they care about you, and you got each other's backs. And as you get to know people, people go, well, how do I build these relationships? You have to discover the unique commonalities you have with people. I mentioned that I met Brad when I walked in the door. If Brad was here from Harvard, which isn't nearly as good as Carnegie Mellon, if Brad was here from Harvard, I wouldn't have had anything to say to him. He still would be wearing a red sweatshirt, but we wouldn't have had a conversation. Instead, we talked for 15 minutes. We talked about the city of Pittsburgh. We talked about how his program is both in computer science, which of course Carnegie Mellon dominates that discipline, and in combination with the Tepper School of Business, which is one of the top business schools. And when those two came together, the innovation of the product he has happened. Well, my daughter, two things. She was a undergrad graduate of the Tepper School of Business. She also was the head ambassador for 2 years, giving tours and people finding out about the campus. They call me Andrew ambassadors because Carnegie Mellon loves their founder, Andrew Carnegie. So everything is Andrew this, Andrew that. So it's the Andrew ambassadors. And we were able to talk about that because they're located in the Tepper School of Business building, which opened while my daughter was there. I'm going far too far down the thing. But we talked about this. Do you think when Brad gets home and he thinks about today, he'll remember meeting me? Brad?
Yeah.
God, I hope so, after I talked about it on the stage.
I'm on the hot seat right now.
But you find uncommon commonalities. And the thing I do when I speak to really big audiences, I'm going to use Brad as an example just because I'm picking on him. I say it's this simple. I ask the audience when I'm in big rooms, 1,000 people, I say, is anyone here from Pittsburgh? And actually, no matter where I am in the country, very few hands go up. You guys don't let people out very often.
We all return.
Yeah, well, but like they don't even go to conferences. Like anybody from Pittsburgh, and people are no, or they don't want to admit it. But if somebody raises their hands, and we're going to use Brad because he lives in Pittsburgh. Brad, if you and I were having a sandwich together, where would the coleslaw and the fries be? They'd be stacked inside the sandwich. The rest of you are going, no, Tom. Coleslaw and fries are called sides. They belong on the side. But in Pittsburgh, they put their coleslaw and their fries in their sandwiches, and it's a thing. That's an uncommon commonality, because we can talk about Parmenti Brothers and the sandwiches and how it's more meat than a human being should eat in one sitting. We can talk about those things. So ask people questions. Ask people, where'd you go to school? Ask people, how long have you lived in Austin? Best question to ask in Austin, how long have you lived in Austin? Because how many people were born and raised here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 4.5, because this guy's like this. He was raised here. See, that's what they're saying.
I got here as fast as I could.
Yeah, we all got here as fast as we could. By the way, sideline, you know when the best time in Austin was over the last 50 years? The week you moved here. Right? Because everybody's like, oh, it's too crowded now. It was much better 8 months ago. Try 31 years. That was the best time here. So the point is that you want to find things that can launch conversations. Oh, you've lived in Austin 10 years. What brought you here? Oh, I moved here for Dell. Oh my gosh, did you know so-and-so? They work at Dell. You have those conversations. That's how you build these uncommon conversations. You ask questions about people, and when you find something in common, you have a conversation. Doesn't mean you're going to have a love connection with everybody, but it's finding the things you have in common is how we connect. So talking about work, how many people work fully remote? About a quarter of the room. How many people work fully in the office every single day, 5 days a week? Wow. How many people are hybrid? The rest of the room. That's pretty good. So it's pretty well evenly distributed, although most people aren't going to the office. Here's a question for you. Do you think it's easier to build culture remotely or in person?
In person.
In person, because it's how human beings are set up. Do you think every company should be in person? No. Not necessarily. In fact, probably not. There's a lot of great companies who fully are hybrid and they make it work. But if you work on a hybrid team, those of you who raise their hands, how many of you think every day, how am I building connections to my coworkers? Not as many hands went up. This is something that you need to think about, is what am I doing to connect? Because without connections, you could be like the lady who called me and be on the chopping block and not know it if your boss doesn't tell you. What were you going to ask?
Now, I was going to comment that actually I also was in the same boat where my manager highly recommended going in person.
Yeah.
Once a week.
Yeah, the manager suggested it. This is the thing, you gotta figure it out. So a couple years ago in the pandemic, one of my friends from California called me and said, Tom, you talk about this stuff, will you talk to my son? He works for a pretty, not like a Google, but a pretty successful tech company, mid-sized tech company in the Valley, and the guy's doing really well. And he said he just got passed over for a promotion, and he's really not happy. So I get on the phone with my friend's son, I've only met him a couple of times, same thing, he's really upset, we're having a conversation, he said, they said we could work remotely forever. So I moved my family to our house in Tahoe because it was a better place to raise my kids than right in the middle of the valley. And he goes, this promotion was a wink, wink, nudge, nudge, this is yours. He goes, it just went to someone else in my office. And he goes, when I asked why, they said, well, she's here every day and the job involves managing 20 people, 16 of which are in the office. And he goes, I'm not supposed to be penalized for this. And I said, you weren't, you just didn't get a promotion. He has since, once the lease on his house expired and the tenants moved out, he's moved his family back to the Valley because he loves the company, he loves the job, he has a lot of stock options, he wants to stay. But he realized that in that company, to achieve the levels he wants to achieve, he physically has to be there. Is that fair? I don't know. Is it right? I don't know. But we have to not get caught up in, well, that's not fair. They said I could live in Tahoe. Yeah, they also didn't promise you that you get promoted every single time. So I'm licensed to teach this program called the Trust Edge. And trust is the underlying piece of all of this. All of the relationships we have, whether it's your marriage, your family, your friendships, is based on this idea of trust. So normally I ask the audience to say what trust is. We only have a few minutes left. Trust is a confident belief in a person, a product, or an organization. That's all. It's that simple. Do the people you work with have that level of trust in you? And do you have that level of trust with your team? If the answer is no, these are conversations you need to be having. When your team has trust and accountability, lots of things happen. Number one, good things happen. Output goes up. Morale goes up. Retention, and that's something every company cares about more than anything right now. Retention goes through the roof. Productivity is higher when there's a lot of trust between teammates. Have you ever worked on a team where you didn't trust one of your teammates?
Yeah.
Or do you feel good giving them a project when you know they might screw you over? No. You don't. Productivity goes down because now you got to play politics. You got to give it to them, but you got to send a CC to the boss. Everything gums up when there's not trust. Innovation, I already talked about, goes up. Loyalty goes up. And here's the thing for the company. When there's high levels of trust and accountability within a team, revenue goes up. Who wins when revenue goes up? All of us, right? Everybody wins. The shareholders win, company wins, employees win. But when trust goes down, costs go up, problems happen, suspicion happens, there's more attrition, the time to market takes longer, and people are stressed who work there. So this trust piece is key for companies, and trust is connected to the relationships that we build, because here's the thing. As human beings, we build relationships through shared experiences. I want all of you to think back to high school or college. You probably keep in touch with a couple of people. Probably don't keep in touch with everyone you knew in college, but you keep in touch with a couple of people. Who are those people? Are they people from Psych 101 in that big room with 500 people? You sat across the room from them, and once in a while, on the quad, on the cut, on the green, whatever you call it, where you go, went to school, you passed them by and you went, dude. I say dude because I went to college in San Diego, or are the people you keep in touch with today people who were in the dorms with you, people who were in your fraternity or your sorority, or they were in a sports club with you, or they were in a study group. It's who you went on spring break with every year. Who are the people, the first or the last, that you keep in touch with? The last. Nobody says, oh yeah, I totally keep in touch with that person I never spoke to in college. It doesn't work that way. We build relationships through sharing experiences with other people, and that matters inside your team and inside your industry. So start thinking about, what am I doing to share experiences? This can be done remotely, but it takes effort. When I said, how many of you who are remote actively work on this, 3 hands went up. If nothing else comes out of my 30-minute talk with you today as we wrap this up, tomorrow start thinking, how am I building trust? How am I building relationships with the people who I work with? And one of the ways, ask a lot of questions. Learn about them. They've actually done surveys. They send people out on blind dates. You've probably seen this on reality TV. You know, they put a couple out on a date, they put a camera in the flowers, they float a microphone in the beer, they record everything, and then afterwards they interview them in separate soundproof booths, and they say, what'd you think? The person who talks the most says, I love them, I hope we get married and have 3 kids. The person who talks the least says, yeah, I don't know if I want to go out with them again. So if you're curious about people, how'd you get into product management? How did you get into this game? You know, what do you want to do in the future? The more questions you ask of people, the more they are naturally going to like you. The more you talk about yourself and do your elevator pitch. You know, you all know what the elevator pitch is, right? The idea is you get in the elevator, and there's someone in your industry, and you're like, oh, they could hire me. And you flick an invisible switch in your back. And for me, as a speaker, I would be like, you hire speakers for your company? I flick a switch and go like, hi, my name is Thom Singer. I've written 12 books. I have a podcast. I speak to companies just like you about how to bring your teams together. Blah, blah, blah. Just verbal vomit all over you. What would you do when we got to the lobby and the doors open?
Run as fast as you can.
Run! In 15 years of speaking on this subject, nobody has ever said, I'd take you to Starbucks to learn more. Run is what everybody screams out. So what we're teaching people with an elevator pitch and talking about yourself when you first meet people is how to repel others in business. Now, there's a time and a place where you should be able to talk about yourself, and if you ask them a lot of questions, most of them will ask you questions. So be curious and ask questions, get them to talk, and you're gonna have a better shared experience. They're gonna like you more. And you have to do it consistently. So I have a minute left, and I will tell you, if you liked what I talked about, if anything you were like, this sucked less than other speakers, if there was a little piece that went, this is the part I'm gonna tell you. As you go out and do this, as you make the relationships in your company and outside your company a priority, it takes time. You have to do it consistently. It can take years to build a network where your inner circle and beyond have your back and think of you. It can take 3 to 5 years. And I was speaking to a group once and I said 5 years, and this guy goes, oh my God, 5 years? In 5 years I'll be 55. Well, I hope so, because that beats the alternative. For those of you who didn't get that, the alternative would be dead. So you have to make your commitment to people an everyday, consistent activity. And you need to make sure that you're helping others too. Because sometimes people go like, I go out and network and nobody helps me. And I go, great, when's the last time you helped somebody get a job or you helped somebody get a promotion? I'm too busy to do that, but why aren't they helping me? That's the problem. You need to go out and serve others, And then people will be like, I want to get around her because she helps people. I want to be in her orbit, and then they'll help you. And it's a long time. You have to do it absolutely consistently. But start thinking about, how will I stand out in a world of a lot of choices? Because when it comes to who stays at the company during layoffs, who gets hired, who we pluck away from a competitor when we have an opportunity, the reality is there's a lot of choices, just like going into Starbucks. Every time you walk into a Starbucks, you have 150,000 beverage choices. Because there's 3 flavors and a decaf, there's 4 different sizes, there's frappuccinos and smoothies, there's bottled drinks in the thing. You start doing the mathematics. We need my mathematician son-in-law to figure it out, but it comes out to about 150,000 different beverage choices. But every time I go into a Starbucks and I get up to the counter, I order a grande non-fat vanilla latte. Every single time. That's what you want to be in your career. For everyone you know in your inner circle and beyond, you want to be their grande non-fat vanilla latte. Because people will go to who they know, they like, and they trust. And if you build a reputation of a person who brings trust and caring to the team, it's going to be hard for them to lay you off. Doesn't mean it can't happen, but they're going to lay off that person who nobody knows, probably, before you. Unless you suck at your job. I'm assuming you're all fantastic. All right, this is a long run. It's not a sprint. It's been a pleasure to spend the time with you. I thought I had a little bit more than 30 minutes, so I crammed it all in as fast as I can. If you have any questions, I'll stick around through the break before the next person sets up. But I really believe that people are your secret weapon to a long and prosperous career. So if you're not already investing in people, start today. You're in your industry. Start here. Thank you very much.